All right, so we're here with Arch Rao. He's the founder and CEO of Span.io. And I just thank you so much for being here, Arch. I want to ask right off the bat, what is Span?
Yep, thanks for having me here, Zach. Span is a smart electrical panel that we've brought to market over the last 3.5 years. We are a company that's building a number of electrification products so that we can truly decarbonize people's everyday lives in their homes. Our first product is a smart electrical panel that takes the place of a traditional circuit breaker box, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's a sensing device, it's a control device, and it's its own gateway computer, if you will, for the home.
All right, so I want to go back one step because you kind of bored me there. You're talking about an electrical panel. I mean, everyone kind of knows what they are, but I think you only interact with it when something goes wrong and you have to go down the basement with your flashlight and flick the breaker back on. I remember my grandfather actually used to go down to when it used to be a fuse box, and he would put pennies in instead of because he ran out of fuses. Talk about safety not being a good. But anyway, why do we even need to talk about electrical panels? They seem so just boring.
Yeah, I think that's been, it's always been the device that's been sitting in your garage or in your basement or outside your home. And it's not one that the consumer typically interacts with, but it's increasingly becoming the device that often customers have to upgrade or replace if they want to get, say, an electric vehicle and a home EV charger or a solar system or a battery. And it, by design, is at the center point of all things in your home that's electrical, right? What we've done is taken what is a ubiquitous device that has to be in every single home and essentially made it a digital, much better version of it. Right.
Now, where'd you come up with this idea? Because I know you used to work at Tesla, right? So did that give you the aha moment of we need to change old electrical panels to something smarter?
Yeah, there were a number of points in time while I was at Tesla. I was leading the product team at Tesla for the energy business, and we deployed several thousands of solar systems, home batteries, electric vehicle chargers around the world. And empirically, we just saw a rapid increase in the rate at which we had to upgrade electrical systems in a home just to make customers able to adopt distributed energy, right? It certainly seemed like an operational pain point that needed to be overcome. And then back in 2018, I decided to leave Tesla and spend some time exploring what I wanted to do next. And that's when I landed at the importance of consumerification of energy and electrification, and the importance of rethinking infrastructure, especially at the edge of grid in a home, to make it easier for customers to make the right choice, if you will, to decarbonize. And architecturally, the electrical panel was the most obvious place to start reinventing.
Okay, but it still sounds boring to me. I mean, it's just a box full of switches. What does your Span panel do?
So in its simplest and dumbest form, if you will, it houses a number of circuit breakers, which you talked about earlier, that are the analog safety devices for circuits in your home, right? If there's too much current being drawn through it, it pops open. If there's a ground fault or an arc fault, it pops open. But what we've had to do in order to make batteries work or solar work or EV charging work is augment the traditional panel with a third-party meter, right? Or a control system and a computer and a communication device. We've essentially packaged all of those things into our panel and made it, let's call it a more robust device for being able to monitor every circuit, control every circuit, be the device that can safely island your entire home, which means every single circuit in your home can be safely disconnected from the grid in the event of a power outage, and allows you real flexibility through an app at any time to control devices in your home.
Okay, but I hear a lot of people watching this right now, and they're like, well, I don't normally interact with my panel anyway, so is this just going to save me a trip down to the basement? What can I do with it?
So I think the first step is reducing the cost of adoption. So by using a product that's fully integrated, the installation cost goes down significantly. So for those customers that are thinking that buying a storage system or a solar system is too expensive, we reduce that cost. For customers that are looking to get an EV charger, we make it possible for a lot of them to get that charger without having to upgrade their service, which you might know, for more than 70% of homes in the US, the home electrical service is only about 100 amps. When you add an EV charger, you have to go through this expensive and time-consuming process of having to upgrade your service. We completely avoid that because think of us as a digital control system, right? So there's the cost benefit piece of it. From a functionality standpoint, we're the only product that allows you to digitally not just control circuits and loads in your home, but also automate what your home does when there's an outage or when there's a peak power cap that you have on your electricity bill. And the goal is for it to be digital interface to your home, to your built environment, one that you spend a lot of time in, and you don't really think about it, but it informs you about what's happening in your home and allows you to control it.
All right, so I'm going to be updating my house to geothermal soon, and I have 200 amps that's coming in, and the geothermal company said, you know what, Zach, you need to update to 400 amps for our system. Would this be something I could use so that I don't have to do that? And if so, how would that work? Because that could save me a lot of money.
Absolutely. And I think this is a increasingly common use case that we're seeing now. Geothermal is a very good example of a fully electric solution that you're bringing into your home to displace your traditional HVAC, right? Your propane-based heating system, if you will. The incumbent methodology for determining how much ampacity or how many amps you need in your home is just a linear addition of all the loads and assuming that they're all turned on at the same time, because that's the worst case scenario, right? But that's never or very rarely the case, that your car charger, your geothermal heating system, your oven, induction cooktop are all on at the same time. We essentially become the power router for your home. We see what's consuming the most amount of bandwidth or power, and we can either allow you to charge up or your car or turn on your geothermal system, or we can taper down loads to allow you to turn on other systems while not violating how much power you draw from the grid, right? In most homes, 200 amps is plenty for you to get to a place where you have air conditioning, pool pumps, car charging, geothermal, etc.
Okay, this is now beginning to sound kind of obvious. So why hasn't something like this happened before?
It's just the nature of technology evolution, right? I think there are many companies over the last 20 years that have worked on new solar technologies, solar modules, solar inverters, etc. In the last 10 years, there have been companies that have been designing and developing batteries that have been augmenting solar installations. And now electric vehicles are becoming increasingly common. Every OEM wants to become an EV OEM. What they haven't looked up to see is that there's infrastructural bottlenecks or limitations that impede the ability for us to get solar plus storage plus charging, if you will. And I think having been in this domain for the last 20 years, that became a painful, an obvious pain point that we could address.
All right, so let's talk about EV charging. We've got a couple of EV chargers here, and I know that when you plug in both cars, the demands of the system go way up. So how can SPAN help me with that if I had that installed in my house?
We strongly believe that electric vehicles is probably the first electrification product that consumers are going to adopt, even if they don't think about it as a journey towards decarbonization, right? And EV charging today ends up being, for most customers, a less than experience, because they either have to pay for a tremendous service upgrade or they end up getting a slower charge rate than their car can handle. And that problem only becomes more acute when you have two EVs and therefore two EV chargers in a home. We've designed a smart panel that can monitor every load in your home and can taper down loads to avoid that service upgrade. But we've also built our own EV charger called SPAN Drive. And it's unique in that, unlike other smart chargers that allows you to change the rate of charge, our charger communicates with our panel to then change the consumption of other loads and devices in your home to allow you to smartly charge up if you want to charge faster.
Okay, so walk me through that, because now my brain is like, okay, well, what? I mean, because normally I'd have to go around the house and shutting things off, but you're saying the panel could smartly shut things off. Like, what could it shut off to save, send more energy to the EVs?
Let's take a very simple example. Let's say that you have your car plugged in. It can accept a maximum 48 amps coming in. And let's say your home is 100 amps of capacity, right? If you have your water heater running currently, and let's say your dryer running currently, those two things combined maybe consume 65 amps. So you only have 35 amps of capacity available to charge your car. We can just allow you to charge at a full 35 amps as opposed to having a hard limit of, let's say, 20 amps or 25 amps. But if you want to charge faster because you have to get somewhere, you can prioritize that through our app. And it'll essentially communicate with your water heater and say, let's turn off the water heater for a while, or let's change the set point, now opening up another 30 amps of capacity so that you can get to a full 48 amps of charge for your vehicle. And you can think about this playing out in different scenarios for different homes, right? Where we're able to, again, essentially be the smart power router for your home.
Let's talk about expense. I know that a regular electrical panel is just a metal box, and then there's some breakers in it. I'm assuming this is more expensive, but I know also that people usually don't take into account total cost of ownership. So is there like a payoff period where it would actually be cheaper to go to SPAN?
Yeah, for a lot of the customers that are adopting SPAN today, they're often getting SPAN along with the battery system, right? And in that scenario, a SPAN panel with a single battery is cheaper than a solution with two batteries for a home. for example, right? And the reason I make that comparison is if you want to have a home that's fully backed up, or what's called whole home backup, where you can power most of your loads or all of your loads, you need at least a couple of batteries. Whereas in our case, we can give you that same functionality by being able to control loads and extend the duration of outage with, again, the smart split into a panel. And right there, you save a few $1,000s, where the installed cost is roughly the same.
Oh, this makes sense because when I was sizing, our power walls, or even before that, our generator, it was a dumb calculation. It was like, well, these circuits need to be on, so we have to assume the worst case. But you're saying no longer do you have to do that. It can be smart.
That's right. And empirically, what we've seen with customers that have a SPAN panel and a single battery, not only can they get whole home backup, they get effectively the same duration of outage protection as having roughly 1.7 batteries with just a single battery. Because again, we're able to monitor non-essential loads and shed them through the app, and then look for essential loads and sort of taper them down as your battery capacity drains, right? And anecdotally, I can tell you for customers that have installed 2 or 3 power walls, they don't realize this because they don't have this real-time feedback. They might endure a power outage at night, and the power wall just drains into the car that's plugged into charge. And that's the opposite of what you want to do when you have an outage, right? Another example I can give you where customers are buying our product today is with our charger, we're able to avoid a expensive service upgrade, right? So in some places, like in PG&E, in California, Northern California, it can cost up to $40,000, not to mention a wait time of around 12 months to have the utility come out and put in new power lines or conductors into your home to go from 100 to 200 amps, or maybe 200 to 400 amps. And that's just not a sustainable cost when you're trying to install a simple EV charger. So if you put our product retails for $3,500, if you put a SPAN panel in with our charger, we avoid that exorbitant upfront cost out of the gate. Not to mention, there's a tremendous amount of added functionality we bring to the customer, that real-time visibility of what's happening in your home, the ability to control loads. But as you can imagine, directionally where we're going is we have this rich data set that can then help us inform if something is going amiss in your home, be it your refrigerator compressor, be it the air conditioning system that might fail, and avoid that failure by informing you about it with what we're calling our check engine light feature.
Wait a minute, hang on. So this has happened to me where a fridge has died in the middle of the summer, and then it takes longer than you think to get a new fridge. And so your whole life is
especially
disrupted.
Now.
Exactly. So you're telling me that this might be able to tell me before the fridge goes bad and give me time to a couple weeks notice or something?
That's directionally where we're going. And in fact, we want to get to a place where we can do it a couple of months ahead of time, right? We are seeing very high resolution consumption data down to every single circuit out of the box, right? So we're able to serve that information up to you. But more importantly, we are developing algorithms that look for anomalies in performance of appliances and circuits, right? And this can be done with just the raw data we're collecting at every single circuit. We don't have to do any disaggregation of the data, if you will, right? By doing that, we have now started to see that we can fairly confidently predict anomalies in performance that can then be highlighted through the app. So we'll send you a push notification saying, "Hey Zach, we see something out of whack here. Would you like to take a look at the data?" Wait for a few weeks if you don't act on it and say, "Hey, we see something anomalous happening frequently over here, and it's correlated with your weather. So it looks like it might be a compressor failing. Would you like us to connect you with a maintenance service provider to come and take a look at it?" Right? So progressively engaging the customer where they can potentially avoid a catastrophic failure, right? Or not having refrigeration or air conditioning when you need it most.
Wow. I mean, both those things have happened to me, and I can attest that it is not fun when it does, because when it's happening to you, it's happening to everyone else. Usually is the height of summer or whatever. So that would be amazing. Another piece that just came to my mind would be in a house, you've got lots of things that are on now that, like, when you shut them off, they're not always off. They're using 5 watts or 15 watts. Can SPAN see that?
Absolutely. So these are called vampire loads, right? It's something we've known about for a long time. And sort of the age-old wisdom has been go around the house and turn off things that you don't need. But frankly, human behavior hasn't caught up to that sort of sensible behavior, right? So I think we're able to detect when things are consuming power, even perhaps when nobody's in the home. And we can either inform you about it. I think the first step is informing the customer. And the second step is if you want us to autonomously turn some of those circuits off, we're able to. And this might seem like a odd example, but this happens more often than you think. Somebody might leave their curling iron on, or they might leave a pressing iron on somewhere. And They want to be able to turn it off when they're driving to work, right? And they're able to turn off the entire circuit in the event that's something they're concerned about.
Now, a lot of people watching might be like, you know what, Zach? I don't need to get a span because all I need to do is buy some smart switches and some smart outlets. So that's what I'm going to do. Is that a solution for me if I just want to do the cheaper way out? Can I just fill my house with smart switches and smart outlets?
One could, right? And I think there have been almost too many smart devices that have entered into our living spaces right now. And the challenge with them is that each of them end up being appliance or end appliance specific, right? It's tied to a single device. It doesn't understand what's happening around the rest of the house. And oftentimes you need a separate app for each smart switch or smart plug that you have in your home. Our thesis is this information should be available to every homeowner all the time, right? And this control layer should be available to you all of the time as well. So by placing all of that sensing and actuation in the panel, which is a more persistent device, we're able to see whatever end appliances you have for the next 30 or 40 years. That's not true when you have a specific smart plug or smart switch installed in your home, right? So I just think architecturally, it's a more elegant system or an elegant solution for being able to offer visibility and controls into a home.
So I've, in a former life, was a building contractor, worked with a lot of electricians, and I've been surprised over the past few years that many of the electricians I work with don't really know about power walls and batteries, and I don't know that they're going to know about this. So if I'm working with electricians, are they just going to scratch their head? Are they going to know how to install this thing? Or do I have to find like some special, certified electrician?
That's a really good question. I think electrical contractors and the availability of labor is going to be the largest impediment for scaling electrification products across this country, right? We've intentionally designed the product to be very, very, very easy for any licensed electrician to install, in that the physical interfaces that it has is no different than a traditional panel. All of the magic, if you will, all of our IP is essentially embedded behind a very familiar bus bar. So what they see is a main breaker and some stabs that they can put a traditional circuit breaker into. In fact, we're the only panel out there that's been licensed or that's been certified to accept any 1-inch residential breaker, be it single pole or a dipole or a quad, be it GFCI or AFCI, it doesn't matter. We're able to accept that from any brand into our panel. So the goal is very much, how do we make it easy for an electrical contractor to take a product out of the box, throw away the installation manual, and know exactly how to install it?
Now, does the consumer have to worry that if their Wi-Fi goes down or their internet goes out, that they're going to lose power because the panel isn't going to be smart anymore?
That's a very good question. So a lot of the logic actually runs locally on the computer. Again, we're not stingy with the compute that we deploy into the panel itself. And one of the consistent requests we've had from customers is, hey, can I still control this directly by connecting over Bluetooth? And that's a feature we're planning to roll out very shortly here.
Now, you mentioned there's an app. So that means now as a homeowner, kind of like I can look at my power walls or my solar system on an app. I could look at my span.
That's right. You can look at not just what's happening from a load perspective in your home, but in fact, we pull in the information from your solar inverter, from your battery, like a power wall, and present all of that through a single app. In the Span Home app. And going beyond that, we give you the control at every circuit level. And then increasingly, we're rolling out features that allow you to understand things like anomalies in your home, if you will.
I feel like most people don't really know what kind of power they're using. Years ago, I used to have this little device called a kilowatt. You would plug it in and then plug something else into that. And I was fascinated. I'd just walk around my house plugging different things in and like, wow, that uses 65 watts or whatever. But I think nowadays, most people, it's an outlet. It's ubiquitous. So we don't even think like what it's drawing. It seems like this would be really fascinating to me as like an energy nerd, because then I would be able to actually see what my house is doing. Have you found that users are finding that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely something we're discovering, and there are different levels of engagement from customers, right? I think folks like you and I would love to look at energy data and try to figure out exactly what's happening down to a plug socket, and then for most others, it's wanting to make sure that their air conditioning system is not super inefficient, or that they're not getting overcharged on their energy bill from the utility company during summer peak hours, right? So I think there's for every type of customer, we have information that makes it beneficial for them to have the Span Homeowner app.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. Sometimes you add like a window air conditioner on those really hot summer months, and then you just kind of forget about it. You don't have any idea what it's adding to your electrical bill, because how would you know? But here, I would guess you could actually figure that out.
quite precisely as well. And I think we go one step further. We are soon rolling out a product feature that allows you to essentially cap the maximum amount of power you want to pull from the grid at any given point in time, right? So if you're in Arizona, as an example, or now increasingly in California, where you have what's called a demand charge, even as a residential customer, you get charged a significant multiplier on your energy bill, depending on what your peak consumption is over the course of a month, right? Especially during the hot summer months. We're able to say, hey, customer, we can save you $20 this month by not allowing you to run both your air conditioning systems simultaneously, or not allowing you to turn on your EV charger or charge your car when there isn't solar, right? And all of that is just programmed in through an app, and it does it for you.
That sounds really cool. Okay, so looking down the road into the future, right now, like my power walls are controlled by my local utility. I get paid actually for them to use them to help my neighborhood. Is it possible down the road that my utility could take control of my span with my permission and like limit my usage on a hot summer day or something like that?
Yes. In fact, we are doing that with some utilities already. We announced a program with a utility up in the Northeast in Vermont, where they are essentially rebating the span panel to their customers in exchange for the customers allowing them to control a small number of loads in their home, just the major loads, right? Turn off my water heater, turn off my EV charger, or ramp down some of these loads when there is a peak demand event at the network level. And we're seeing similar sort of what are called virtual power plants that are use cases or applications that span PowerList well into. The advantage I believe we have is that, again, we can see the whole home, so we can see what are different loads that we could control. And we're agnostic to what kind of car you drive, what kind of charger you have, or what kind of battery system you have. They can all be fed through the same, again, ubiquitous panel.
So what if I want to, in the future, do some kind of vehicle-to-grid system where I want to be able to plug my car into my house and maybe have it power some circuits? That usually ends up being a very complicated discussion and, electricians scratching their head. Does SPAN help me if I have that?
Absolutely. I think one of the increasingly interesting use cases for electric vehicles, or at least an expectation from many customers, is that if I just bought a $50,000 electric vehicle, can it power my home when there's an outage? Candidly, there aren't any car companies today that give you that V2X or V2H, vehicle to home capability today that truly works out of the box. The incumbent solutions require a really complex electrical setup where you have a panel and then a sub panel that's your critical loads panel, some kind of a disconnect, a third-party inverter that the car then has to connect to through a DC charging port, etc. Right? We've essentially combined a lot of those product requirements from a grid disconnect, a measurement or a metering device, a control system, all into our panel. And in next generation products, we're looking to work directly with some EV OEMs to give customers a very, very simple and elegant vehicle to home product offering that just works through our charger, right? But before we promise to deliver that, we want to make sure that it works seamlessly and for essentially every car out there so that it can be a mass product as opposed to being a customized solution for every single homeowner.
That sounds exciting. Is it possible, because your panel is a computer, that I could get over-the-air updates like I do with my Tesla?
That's right. So I think some of the key functionality, both on the hardware and software side, is already embedded within our product, right? Like the disconnect we talked about, the ability to control individual circuits, and of course the software that can be over-the-air updated into our panels. Really, what we're looking to design and develop is downstream connectors, like your EV charging port, if you will, EV charging a plug, if you will, that then allows us to interface with the panel seamlessly.
Do you think there are going to be incentives and more incentives from state and local governments or federal governments about things like this? Because we're trying to improve our electrical grid, and it sounds like this is a really smart way to do it.
Yeah, I just found out from our team last week, for example, that there is a significant cost, not just to the customer, but a cost to be borne by each utility if you ask them to upgrade your service. So for example, when you ask your local utility to say, give me 400 amps of power as opposed to 200 amps, there's a roughly $1,000 to $2,000 cost that they have to bear upfront. That avoided cost is perhaps sufficient to justify a panel like SPAN being installed in lieu of having to bring in new distribution capacity, new power lines, or new poles into your home, right? But as you know, regulation takes a bit of time to evolve. We're working with a number of utilities and regulators to help them understand the potential of our product as a leapfrogging solution as opposed to being reactionary and having to build out more infrastructure upstream to support customer electrification.
So if people watching right now are kind of excited and interested and they don't know what to do next, I mean, I'm assuming they can go to your website, span.io, but would they be having an electrician buy this or would they buy it themselves? Tell me how that works.
Yeah, our North Star is to electrify as many homes as possible, as quickly as possible. I think that's our best bet at decarbonizing at scale. So you can come to our website and you can place an order for a panel, and we'll work with you to actually use one of our network electricians in your region. We're already in about 35 states right now across the US, and install it for you. Right, and you would pay Span essentially to find the right electrician to install it in your home, and it takes on the order of a few weeks. But if you're considering getting, let's say, a solar system and a battery, we often will connect you with one of our solar installation partners. We're currently partnered with Sunrun. They're the largest solar installer across the country, and they're obviously offering storage as well. And we are also partnered with a number of locally dominant solar providers across different states in the US that we can work with.
I love talking to companies like yours that are disrupting something big. You're disrupting a huge industry. I think it's one of those things where most people didn't even know it was something worth disrupting, and you figured that out. But talk to me about your company. It's a private company at the moment. Do you have plans to go public? Is there talks of IPOing or SPACing where people could start to invest, or what's going on there?
I'd rather not speculate too much about that. I think I'd say we're well capitalized. We've raised just shy of $150 million in the last 3.5 years. Since our founding, and a good chunk of that is focused on R&D so that we can build the safest and best products that we can bring into a home. And currently, we're looking to scale our operations to be able to serve as many homes in the US as possible. The truth of it is, it takes on the order of a decade to build really impactful products and companies, and we're only in year 4 of that journey, of the first leg of our journey, if you will. And disrupting incumbent technology companies, but also a somewhat slow-moving infrastructure space or domain like energy is just expensive. So we're glad to have phenomenal investors today, but we'll continue to bring on board more capital from well-matched investors to continue to grow here.
And then lastly, people who are watching in other countries outside the US, are there any plans for your company to go to Europe or Australia or Asia?
Yeah, that's a great question. The beauty of our system architecture is that it works just as well in any place that has a distribution panel, and literally every home has to have a distribution panel. The local code and regulation is different, of course, in different geographies. So we expect to be bringing a non-US version of the product to market, or non-North America version of the product to market sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. And we'll likely be starting with Europe, just given the customer sentiment towards electrification that's already very strong there, but also because it's a strong market for EV adoption.
Arch, thank you so much for telling us about Span today. I'm really excited. I'm probably going to be working with your team to maybe get one, because this does sound like a great solution rather than having to upgrade my panel to 400 amps. As you mentioned, utility companies don't generally do that quickly, let's just say. So this could be a great solution for me. Thank you so much again for taking time today and talking with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time as well, Zach.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Disruptive Investing. Be sure to like the video and subscribe. Click the bell button to be notified when new videos come out.